Oh, man.
Welcome to On the Beat, where we bring you a different Buffalo Bills beat reporter every week, exclusively on the Overreaction Sports Network.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of On the Beat, brought to you exclusively on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network. This show is where we will bring you an exclusive interview with a different beat reporter or sports journalist each week to talk about the swirling topics of the moment. I am the Big O, Jerry Ostrowski. You can find me on Twitter at Ostrowski_Big O. He is John Fina. Fina, where can we find you?
At John Fina, baby. Made it easy.
And our guest today, and I don't even, you don't need an introduction, but I'm going to give you one anyway. I'd like to give you a proper, a Ric Flair or something like that type introduction. But joining us today, and we're going to dive deep into the draft, folks, is Muki Hawkins, sports director and Bills beat reporter, Power 96.5 FM, WUFO, 1080 AM. If you know Buffalo sports, if you know the Bills, you know Mookie, and we're glad enough and happy enough to have him on the show with us today. Mook, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, guys, man. It's always a pleasure and an honor to be on with you guys too. I know at one point in time y'all were like protecting one side of the field. You know what I mean? So I love that, respect that.
Well, you got 40% of an offensive line right here.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Obviously, tomorrow night is the big night. Thursday night, we'll get the first round of the draft tomorrow night, Mookie. And, I just kind of, right off the top of the show, I think we'd be amiss if we didn't just get you're embedded. You know a lot of people. You got a lot of connections. You've been doing a ton of work. I imagine you haven't had much sleep. You've been busy as all get out.
Good.
Just kind of maybe some of the things that you've been hearing coming out of One Bills Drive as we head to tomorrow night's first round of the 2024 NFL Draft in Detroit, Michigan.
Hey, we're not asking you to give up sources. Just
we don't need sources. We just need
just the juicy chunks, baby.
Man, it's a lot of things that swirling, around Bills camp. I mean, they did a good job of smoke screening. They did a good job of being in rumor mills. They did a good job of, making themselves known at the combine. So, it gives you a no stone unturned approach by, Brandon Beane and Brass on making sure that this draft class here is going to define the future of this team. So, so far so good. I mean, it's real interesting to see, what of these many scenarios is going to actually take place, how close some things are going to come, close to, materializing, and some falling through. So I guess, at the end of the day, everybody knows that, Bills need a wide receiver. If they were to move up, my guess it would be for Brian Thomas or Dunzier. Pending now that I guess the reports of a shoulder injury for Thomas, but we already know this is that phase of where, the red flags start coming out on guys to make they draft status slide a little bit. And I say, hey, that may be a strategy that could work well for the Buffalo Bills, but do they play that game if this is a guy that they really covet? I mean, even on the flip side of that, on Dunzier, is going up that high too rich for the Bills' blood, to even attempt to play around in the top 10 to go and get a guy like a Dunzier.
And Muki Hawkins joined us. And Mook, real quick, folks, if you're watching on Facebook, you're watching on Twitter, hop over to YouTube, get in the comments like Richard Rush, Tracy, Bella, all of our friends over here in the comments. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, help us out. And, you brought up a good point. You talked about is moving up in the draft too rich for the Bills. And obviously Benjamin Albright was kind of the one this week that started the whole roller coaster of, the Bills aggressively trying to move up in the first round. Two of the spots that I've seen and looking at different scenarios, number 7 to the Titans, and both of these scenarios revolve around Ndunze. If you have him at 7, also see them maybe possibly moving up to 12 with the Broncos. One of the things I want to ask you is, knowing that they have the Vikings high second round pick next year, does that make it easier for Brandon Beane to move the first round pick from next year to get up into the draft, to get that guy if he's available, knowing that he has that high second round pick to where it's almost kind of like a 1B. If you're not in the first round, you're just outside of it.
Again, Jerry, man, it's so many scenarios and variables that you can get that outcome, right? Now, if the Bills, we want to call this a roster revamp. We don't want to call it a rebuild, whatever the case may be, right? So if we're not going to be all in as far as free agency, the Bills need to show right now that they need to be all in this draft, because you don't have time to try to develop guys when your quarterback is top 3, in the league right now. So you got to replace that. You got to go get him elite weapons coming out of college, So that's where I feel if you can't, you got to be all in on the draft, because the Bills, okay, it's cool to be in the favorite to go to the Super Bowl, but you never heard the Bills be talked about, hey, the Bills are all in here. Just by the looks of this roster, the Bills are making an all-in move. You never really heard that. So, with the draft capital that they do have and the position that they're in, and, with the players that they do have on this roster, they have enough to move up. They have enough to move back. It just depends on where the guys are when it's time for them to pull the trigger on, who's high on their board or not. Do I think Odunze is a little bit too rich for the Bills' blood to mortgage, basically, the future on all those draft capitals for one guy? I think that would be a little bit too rich for the Bills' blood. That's why I say Seattle at best at 16. And, the Bills don't really have to give up too much capital. You could put in that second round that you did attain in the Minnesota Vikings deal, or your own second, which one you prefer,
right,
to move up 12 spots in the draft. You probably want to sweeten the deal, throw the 7th round pick in there. That's really only 1 point, and then you probably ask Seattle to give you their 6th round pick or something like that. So you get some little minor deal to move up 12 spots. If Brian Thomas get out of the top 15, or somebody else you covered it right there, then you go move up, you go get your guy. And then, you still got that big gap from 16 to 60. So, you still have draft capital. You could take that one, because to me, what are you holding on to that 1st round pick for next year for? If you know that it's going to be impact players right now, that's going to help your team right now, that's still going to be in that 2nd to 3rd round, use the 1st round pick and, get a 2nd and a 3rd to go along with your 60. And that assures you, 4 to 5 players in the top 100, guys that can play right away.
Mookie, how do you separate what you hear in the rumor mill, from this is possible to get out of here, and what's the percentages, right? So do you listen to 5% of it, and is the rest of it garbage? Do you have sources that you trust? Are you getting maybe better information than some other people?
Yeah. Everybody, and on the beat has their different go-tos where they get, source of information and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you just got to be a realist too, to what's transparent, what's going on with this Bills roster. Say like the Brandon Ayuk deal. I just don't see the Bills paying that type of money to bring in a guy like Brandon Ayuk. When him and Diggs the same. They're the same, other than I guess the baggage, and you doesn't the baggage. But at the end of the day, that deal just really boiled down to Diggs being on the wrong side of 30 at $20 million that the Bills need to exhaust that contract. And you wouldn't have got a third round pick or a fourth round pick. You probably would have got a fifth round pick for Diggs next year, if the Bills were, gun shy on making this move. So this move was a year premature. I'm quite sure Brandon Bean and all those guys was like that. I bet you they knew that they had one more year on that timetable, and that deal was just. I mean, look at how pivotal this second round pick from Minnesota is going to be tomorrow night.
Right, exactly.
So it just based upon that and the realness of what the Bills roster really, you got to get younger guys that's going to be there at a cheaper price. You can't go in and get another $20 million wide receiver. You got to go start from scratch, guys that's going to be with Josh for the next 4 to 5 years, cheap labor but elite with elite traits. So
But I get what you're saying, Mookie. What's your position on getting these guys in a little bit quicker and getting them up to speed? That has historically been my complaint with both James Cook, with Dalton Kincaid. We need the weapon now. We need them to get involved, and I feel like they slow them a little bit. What's your take?
I agree with that. And, that kind of like goes on to the end of time with the Bills at some point in some developmental phases, not to say all of them, but the ones that you expect the most, you would figure like, okay, why, this guy isn't playing, that much. Even Gabe Davis in his second year, you brought in Emmanuel Sanders, but I mean, that was $8 million you brought in Emmanuel Sanders, and I love the guy, but you had Gabe Davis who caught 35 passes and 8 touchdowns his rookie year. It was no reason for me, that's just my opinion, to bring, Emmanuel Sanders in when I had that much production from a rookie in the 4th round. I'm going to up his production and see where that goes. And then maybe, you're ahead of the curve and figure out what you want to do with this guy ahead of time. Do you want to extend him? Or, we all know the situation, how that ended up. He's not on the roster anymore. You're number 2 guy. So now you find yourself in a dilemma where you're 1 and 2 isn't on this roster. And we want to act like, we're that we have that quality.
So what I'm hearing from you is whether the Bills move up or not, wide receivers got to be the pick.
Yes, I believe that. Would it be in this? Excuse me. Would it be in this much of a deep draft class? Then yes.
Let me ask you this, Mookie, and you're watching On the Beat on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network. Mookie, of course, sports director, Buffalo Bills beat reporter for Power 96.5 FM and WUFO 1080 AM. Let me ask you this, because I'm not convinced that it has to be a wide receiver. When you just kind of answered, or stated the thing that I believe in, and which is, this is a very, very deep draft at wideout. And when you're bringing in guys like Leggett, who I think has a 2nd round grade, some have a maybe even a 3rd, there is a ton of talent in that 2nd round. I know we don't have a 3rd round pick as of yet, but, a lot of buzz around the Iowa all-purpose defensive back, Cooper DeJean. This is a guy that's been, it's obvious they are infatuated with him. He's been in the top 30 visits. They've done a lot of time with him at the combine and things like that. Is this a guy that maybe if you're sitting at 28 and he's still around, and you talked about that Seattle pick at 16, the receivers you weren't on around, can you see them moving up and taking a guy that fills multiple holes in a secondary that I think probably has more holes than wideout?
Yeah, that's a possibility. When you look, they didn't do too much movement at safety in free agency. Yes, they did re-sign Tyler Rapp and brought in Mike Edwards, but after that, you have DeMar Hamlin and you have Cam Lewis, as backups right now. So that lets you know that they're still in search for a safety. It could be a possibility that Micah Hyde returns for, one more running back one more time. And the Bills, that still will not stop the Bills from drafting a safety, because that guy ultimately will be groomed by Micah Hyde, and then eventually that person will take over at some point going forward. But safety is definitely a need. If Cooper DeJean is their guy to move up and go get, you go get that guy, because he can play some safety. He can play corner on the outside. He's well versed in that. But it's guys like Tyler Nubin. It's other guys like Javon Bullard, that's going to be available in that second round as well. It's so much meat and potatoes in that second to third. Normally it'd be the fourth and the fifth, right? But this year it's that second and third. So the Bills got a lot of draft capital where they can move up and move up again,
right?
Move back and move up. I think that 2025 picks 1 and 2 are expendable in this year's draft, because there's just so much talent that you can get in that top 100 that could be impact right away.
Mookie, where are you going to be for the draft? Are you going to be at a party? Are you going to be sitting solo and tweeting out your opinions on each pick? What's your plan for tomorrow night?
Oh man, I'm gonna be in the Bills media lab, getting all the juicy stuff if I can, get it before it hits the podium.
I expect you to tweet it out before the pick goes to the podium, Mookie.
Hey, Mookie, what do you feel like is the most either controversial or interesting rumor mill around the league for any other team other than the Bills, if you have the bandwidth to follow it? Like, what's got you thinking, wow, these guys are in trouble, they're going to make something happen?
Man, it never amazes me to see what the hell Tennessee is going to do.
They were rumored to be possible movers with the Bills.
Right. It amazes me. I know that Rand Carthon has done an amazing job thus far with this team, but it just amazes me. I mean, you would expect, how they cleaned house a little bit there as well, so I want to see how that shapes up and the overall scope of that, because they still have some holes they need to fill, especially defensively. Then obviously, losing Derrick Henry. So that's going to be pretty interesting there in Tennessee.
Again, we're talking with Muki Hawkins, part of our beat reporter series on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network. Muki, I'm curious, there's so much to cover just with one team alone. How much time do you have and bandwidth and connections do you have to reach out to other people around the country to see what's happening in with their teams?
Oh man, that's like every day. The people you meet at the combine and other events, credentialed by the league, you build those relations, and then next we're either sometimes we're on the phone call conversation, or we're just texting one another on what's going on and overall scope, or something that's about to happen that hasn't happened. We share that type of information. So it's not going nonstop, with all personalities alike.
Mookie, I have to ask you, John and I both played offensive line in Buffalo. And you said something earlier in the show that I really, really believe in, and I don't think our fan base quite understands. I don't want to say they quite understand the concept of it, but 30 is a big number in the NFL. And even though guys may be playing good football past the age of 30, and there's guys all across the league that do, when you start talking about contracts and lots of money and possible guys that are expendable to get your number, your cap number under where it needs to be, those are usually the first guys you'd look at. We lost a couple of really, really good ones, big leaders, Mitch Morse. We lost Jordan Poyer. Obviously, big holes we have to fill. I go back to Mitch Morse. They took Connor McGovern, and they've now made him, or have said that he announced that he's the starting center going into camp. A guy that I think has maybe 2 or 3 games at the most in the NFL at center, played some at Penn State. Is center a position that you see the Bills going for rather early? Because, once you get that wide receiver position filled or safety position filled, I have to think those are the first 2 they're looking at. is the next target that center spot to bring a guy in that maybe you can groom, or hey, he might surprise you and be a guy that can play day one like Torrance did last year.
Yeah, I mean, Big Cybo just really fell in the Bills' lap right there in the second round. So, could that happen if the Bills were to hold at 28? I think so. If the center from out of Oregon is there, do you entertain grabbing that guy, and then you still could, use pick 1 or 2 from next year to jump back into the second, and still dance with Carolina possibly, or Atlanta, or Washington even. There's still some teams that the Bills could shake and move with in the second round as well, to jump back in, to get to get a second and a third round pick, so they can still get that 4. If you want to move back, is some interior linemen in the later rounds too, like a Bo Lemmer from Arkansas, and you got the guy from Wisconsin out of there, Bortolini there, that could play center and guard as well. But the throw, Con McGovern in the fire, and only minimal starts there at center, and getting rid of your Pro Bowl center, that's going to be quite the sight to see.
Well, one of these three guys on this show right now understands what that's about. So that's why I asked, because it's not an easy task going from being told what to do and then you take the job of having to tell everybody what to do.
Right.
Obviously that's pretty tough. But hey, we got about 10 minutes to go, and I just kind of your thoughts. Where do you see this thing going Thursday night? What? Through the people you've talked to, your connections and all those things, knowing the roster intimately, what the Bills need, knowledge of the locker room, those types of things. Where do you see what do you see him possibly doing tomorrow night when this whole thing kicks off, the 2024 NFL draft?
I think he's going to give you just exactly what he told everybody, that he's competitive as hell. And he's going to do whatever it takes to get this roster to maintain, their contender status. You cannot, go win 4 straight AFC East titles, then all of a sudden you fall off because you didn't got rid of pivotal players. That doesn't make you look good in the eyes of, the guy that cut your check. So I'm quite sure that he's going to be, probably the most busiest he's ever been on draft night. His phone's going to be ringing nonstop. I expect the Bills to be all in this draft class based upon where they are right now, where they have draft assets. And, you look at how they made that move in 2018. They had players to do it. They used Cordy Glenn, right? That became the Tremaine Edmonds pick. And, and now we're going to see what that pick looks like in the 4th round. But you never know what player on the team has trade value as well that you're trying to move. If the Bills are eyeing a tackle early, do you move Spencer Brown because his contract is up? He's in his contract year. Do you rather move a guy rather than let him walk out of your life, if I sort of say,
The number of scenarios is just endless. But, we asked this question to Joe Marino on the phone yesterday. Are you, and you're a fan of the Buffalo Bills and you're deep into this draft, and are you a guy that, like Brandon Beane, you want to make moves? Or as Joe Marino would say, I want the draft to come to me. I'm going to sit back and I'm going to make the most of the picks where they are, maximize all of my picks because I think there's enough talent.
Nah, I go and get my kind of guys, if whatever, at all costs. The guys in the draft are like luxuries, because then after that, then, like you just said, I'll just wait and see what comes to me. I'll wait till after the draft for that. The draft, I'm going to shake and move and go and get the guys that I feel that could be an impact on this team from pick 1 all the way through 7. And then, okay, I'm going to see what's coming to me that I can develop down the line. But any guy that I'm drafting, I'm expecting those guys to be an impact, in the first, if not definitely the second year they're on my roster.
Do you think, last year Beane goes out, gets 2 starters in the first 2 rounds. Williams was a heavy contributor at the 3rd round, the linebacker from Tulane.
Mm-hmm.
How if the Bills do not make any more free agent moves, that set aside if they go, and you've already stated you don't think they'll go after like a Brandon Ayuk or maybe even Justin Jefferson, who's also been rumored to be, possibly traded tomorrow night. Do you think this team just through the draft will have what it takes or what it needs to get through this sticky situation with the cap and continue to be the AFC East champs and, go far into the playoffs?
I do. I know everybody again, results of that Diggs trade, 31 million to a non-quarterback, probably the most in NFL history. I get all that, but look at the overall scenario, right? You take that $31 million in dead cap. Stephon Diggs was owed what, $19.5 million this year, right? So let's subtract that off that $31 million dead cap. Tre'Davious White contract, comes off the books when in June. So you take that $10 million, from the remainder of that, and that leaves you what, $1 million.
Right.
So again, the Bills is going to look like a genius because he was able to get rid of that entire contract. And they got a second round pick on top of that for that, and they have money just to be on the plus side come as early as next year because you're not paying any. I mean, you're not paying Stephon Diggs that crazy contract. You just got rid of that, so that just saved you $18 million for the next 3 years.
Muki, I love your insight. I love your attitude about being aggressive, going and getting your guy. And I could tell you that you've cleared up nothing for me. It's all it's all clear as mud. Everybody who's a fan of their team, and especially our Bills Mafia, is running mock drafts through their head. Did you do a mock draft? Are you tired of mock drafts? Do you think there's any point to them, or you just think it's a fun exercise?
It's a great fun exercise just to really see who's really thinking in the mind of Brandon Beane and the rest of the scouting department. And the whole front office there. It's just amazing how I know they sitting back. I can't believe that everybody's sitting up here trying to think what we think, I guess. So, or what's best for this team. Some often than not, but this is the year they got to go all in. And I did so many mock drafts, so I'm about to put that up. You'll see that in just a minute. I done went crazy with it. I'm telling you, I done moved up to 16 and then jumped back in to the second round. So yeah, I done went kind of goofy with it.
I love it. I love it. Hey, when you're in the PR, the press room at the draft tomorrow night down at One Bills Drive, will you know the pick before Jerry and I know the pick, or are you going to find out at the same moment we do?
We find out a little bit more quicker than anybody else do, unless you two guys, y'all have a lot of connections too. So
I'm connected to you, Muki. Yeah. That's all I need.
The only connection I have, and I can't remember the guy's name. I'll text my buddy who's a local sports radio guy here in town. There's a dude on Twitter that leaks the picks like 5 minutes before they even come out, and I'm surprised they ain't caught this dude yet. I don't know if like the person that walks the cards up to the podium is like a relative or something, but this cat gets the picks like 5 minutes ahead. We only got a few minutes left, and I do want to ask you about a couple of players. Most notably Xavier Leggett from South Carolina, who was in for a top 30 visit. A guy that was a 4.39 guy. Read a little bit about him. He's got a lot of strengths there, and he kind of sounds like a young. I mean, there's some questions maybe about rounding off routes and stuff. It almost sounded a little bit like a younger Gabe Davis. What are the feelings you're getting about him? Because obviously, usually the name that you hear the most is the guy that they don't pick. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times, especially in the later picks, it's not. What do you feel about his chances of being a Bills draft pick, or is there a couple of guys at wide receiver? I know you mentioned a few earlier. I think Brian Thomas Jr. was one of them that they really they really, really covet.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's got to look at what makes sense, kind of. When Brian Thomas Jr. has an element, and there's a few other receivers that kind of had that element, but his difference with him is he has the size and he has the speed. He was only asked to really run 3 routes at LSU, but during the combine, it doesn't seem like, he'll have trouble getting in and out of breaks. So I don't think it's a question of him running an entire route tree. But when you get a guy that's 6'4", 210, runs a 4.3 40, yeah, I mean, that's something that Josh Allen never had the opportunity to throw to as a number one target. So that's why I would say that. I mean, they could fall back and I like Xavier Legette, and I like I like Coleman from out of FSU, because those three guys brings an element to the Bills offense that they haven't had in years, right? So those are my top three fit for the Bills. Then you do have an A.D. Mitchell, and then you have a Lat McConkey. McConkey can play on the outside, but against bigger and taller corners, how will he fare in the NFL? So, I think Josh needs some bigger receivers. We do have a Curtis Samuel. We do have an ascending Khalil Shakur and a Don Kincaid. Get Josh some bigger, taller weapons with catch radius and speed. So, they can make him right, because they have the speed and necessary catch radius.
Good stuff. Good stuff. They broke it down for you, Jerry. I don't know how that conflicts with RJ Young, but we'll have to, our audience will have to come listen to the last 5 minutes of this pod and then go listen to RJ Young break down all the receivers.
No, I think it fits kind of together because, Bean made the comment back when OTA started about, Yak was a very, very important thing in his wide receiver evaluation, yards after catch. So, if you can get size and speed, that's rare. And obviously there's a few of them in this draft that have both. John, you have any final questions?
I don't. I just appreciate you joining us, Muki, and make sure that you let everybody on the pod know where they can find you. And again, you can find Jerry Ostrowski at Ostrowski_Big O, me at John Fina, and this is the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network.
Can I get me one overreaction bonus question from you?
Yeah, man.
Since y'all is like 40% of the offensive line, I mean, what lineman you feel that fits this Bills offense, initiative?
Go ahead, John. You go first.
Man, I don't know. I never loved the idea of reaching for a guy. I think center is the only position where you could really kind of say, that might be a smart play. So, but I don't know that we can get a center and justify it in the first round, and then trading back, then you're turning your back on, the needed wide receiver. If you think that you got a decent center right now, moving into the position, I like this kid, Jordan Morgan from Arizona. He fits into that 1-2 round area, but he's got the ability to be a guard. If something happens, Spencer Brown goes. He's played tackle in college. He's got the form, the fit, and the execution on it. It's hard to say.
Yeah, it's hard to say when you got a big A on your chest, right?
Yeah, that's right, baby. Go Cats.
Personally, I like the center out of West Virginia. He's a good player. The center out of Oregon is a very good player. I think the most intriguing first-round offensive lineman, and it's funny, I actually was in a training camp with his father, John Alt, is the big kid out of Notre Dame. He's a guy that's been rumored to go to the Chargers because we all know that Harbaugh has a love for big physical offensive lines. He wants to try to protect his franchise quarterback. But I would have to think with bringing in Lyle Collins in the offseason. I know he's a little bit older, but he brings a ton of experience. He can be a swing tackle, might even be a guy, Muki, if you heard differently or you can verify this, please do when I'm done. I could see him maybe competing with Edwards for that left guard spot going into training camp, and then maybe swing him out if you have to, because they do have a couple of younger tackles in Buffalo that have developed. I mean, Cromer's did a wonderful job, or has done a wonderful job, continues to, with developing those guys. But, I think maybe, like I say, I want to see us pick a center somewhere relatively soon, quickly, maybe early maybe second day, or definitely early third day, probably would be the most situation or scenario that makes sense. But there are some out there. But I think it's also a position where you can get a tremendous amount of production without picking a guy super high. There's a lot of players in this league that do great things that were 5th, 6th, 7th, round draft picks were free agents. So this is one of those scenarios, and I say this all the time, and people are like, oh, that's just a canned answer. I'm like, well, it's the truth. You know, Brandon Beane pays that scouting department a lot of money to go on the road, you know, 200 and some out of 300 and some 65 days a year to evaluate talent. You got to trust what they do. And I'm sure they'll you know, pick accordingly from their board.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun just to see how basically what this new look Bills team is going to look like, you know, and it starts tomorrow night. So,
Mookie, thanks, man.
We
appreciate you. I'll be following you on Twitter tomorrow night. I'm expecting, you know, DM me that pick early, baby. I you know, hit me up early. You know how to DM me. Hit me up.
Morgan.
Thanks,
All
Mookie.
Right. Thanks, Mookie. Appreciate you. He's Muki Hawkins, sports director, Bills beat reporter, Power 96.5 FM, WFO 1080 AM. Check him out. Catch him on social media and all that stuff. I'm the Big O, Jerry Ostrowski. He's John Fina. He's Muki Hawkins. Thanks for being on, watching On the Beat here on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network. We will be back tomorrow night, Thursday night. Immediate reaction, instant reaction for what the Bills do. This, Mookie, is where we pray to God that they trade up, because that means we go on at 9:30 instead of 12:30. So the only guy that has the advantage in this situation is Fina, because he's on the West Coast.
Right.
So anyway, that's why we hope they trade up. So everybody, thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow night. Instant reaction on the pick. And as always, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Welcome to On the Beat, where we bring you a different Buffalo